So we started, I don't know, it must have been the week before Shavuos, so it's already a couple of months. We talked about Torah and the study of Torah. And obviously this is a global or a very broad issue for us as Jews. We know that this is essentially the defining quality, the defining item of the Jewish nation has been their obsession with Torah. You go back to any point in history, and you see Jews dedicating themselves to Torah study as a life's pursuit. This is what kids, when they dreamt of being great, it wasn't about being great ball players, or nowadays, I don't know what it is nowadays, to be, I don't know what kids are today, what?
Gamer.
To be a great gamer, that's what it is today. But the Jews, historically, throughout the ages, this is what they dreamt of. Like this was the pastime, this was the passion of the Jewish people for millennia. And for us, it's such a big concept. It's Torah. We think of the Torah. We think of the written Torah. What we read in the synagogue, the temple, on Shabbat. It's written in Hebrew. It seems very inaccessible to us. That's a big problem. But the goal of this discussion is to try to, give some insight as to the different reasons, the different themes of why Jews have been obsessed with Torah study throughout the generations. I started kind of a project. I said, okay, everyone's talking about Torah, teaching Torah, I give Torah classes every day. What's it all about? Like, what's the goal? I was studying with someone just today, in a piece of Talmud, and the Talmud says that this is something, it's a law in the Torah that never happened and never will happen. I'm thinking, goodness gracious, this is what we're studying. We're studying things that are entirely implausible. It's impossible. It's a situation that will never even come to pass. And that obviously begs the question, so why is it written? The Talmud there discusses. But, this is when we spend a lot of our time as Jews. When we're acting as Jews, what are we doing, right? We're studying Torah, we're observing the Torah. That is what defines us as a nation. What's it all about? So this is part 3. So I started collecting, and I ended up, I said, I'm for sure about to get 7. So I scheduled a class, 7 reasons why we study Torah. This must have been 6 to 8 months ago. I figured, you know what, I'll get 7. I'll look around, I'll find some sources. I'll find 7. I'm sure I'll find 7. And by the time I gave the first class, it was 17. And now, by today, I'm up to 23, and there's even more. I have to collect it all and organize it. But there's really a lot of different nuances and reasons why we study Torah and how it impacts us as individuals. So let's want to quickly go through what we did the past 2 times, just the header, to perhaps entice you, if you weren't there by that class, to go online and listen to it. Because I think these are really transformational ideas. Reason number 1 that we gave was that it's a mitzvah. I think it's probably the simplest. It's a mitzvah. It's like a mitzvah. It's like Shabbat, eat matzah, and Passover. That's what Jews do. They do mitzvahs, and that's what it means. Okay, that's I think the simplest one. Next is the Torah is not just a mitzvah. It's about studying halacha. It's about knowing what to do. Like, you read the Torah, it gives you instructions, and instructions of how to behave as a Jew. How to wear tefillin, how to make matzah. Well, we buy the matzah; it's already prepackaged. How do you make matzah? Right? There's entire volumes of Talmud that discuss how to make matzahs. There's millions of human hours were spent studying the laws of matzah. And the laws of chametz and matzah. Millions of hours. I'm not even joking. It's probably way more than tens of millions. I myself spent like a long, because why? Like, the element of Torah that deals with matzah and chametz, that comprises an entire book of the Talmud that's studied in every single yeshiva, and there's hundreds of thousands of people today studying in yeshivas, and it's been like that for since the Mishnah was written 2,000 years ago. So you just multiply how much human capital, so to speak, it's a very bad word, but how many human hours have been sweated over this discussion? This kind of opens up an entire world that for many, it's just, well, you just buy it, of course, before Passover. You go to the kosher aisle and you just pick out the matzah. To receive reward, that was number 3. Receive reward, now we said, obviously this was all expanded upon, but to receive reward, that can mean, the idea of the eternal reward. If you accept the premise of God, and I'm making the presupposition that everyone here does, once you accept that, let's assume that we accept that. If we accept that, we have to realize what we're accepting. Right? There's a catch, so to speak. Once you accept the idea of God, you have to, by definition, accept that you have a purpose. Because otherwise, if there's no purpose, right, why would something of astronomical intelligence do something purposeless? That makes sense, right? If you accept the idea of God, you accept the idea of intelligent design, the idea of some great intelligence that's able to create things that are beyond our capacity to even think about how you would go about engineering that. And if it was all made for a purpose. That seems clear, right? And if it was there for a purpose, and we have deduced throughout the years that the idea of being good is part of that purpose. This is something, I know we could belabor this point. I've given an entire 5-part series on the idea of purpose and what God expects from us and how that all works. But in Judaism we say that the purpose is for someone to exercise the free will to make choices to do good versus bad. Now, the next stage of this, I'm sorry if I'm kind of running through some intense philosophical ideas really quickly because I want to get to the feature presentation. But once you accept the idea of our actions mattering, there has to be reactions. Right? If it doesn't really matter if I do good or bad, then it's not purposeful to do good or bad. Right? If there's absolutely no difference, whether or not there's no consequences, then it's immaterial. It's inconsequential, right? If there's no consequences, it's inconsequential. Thus, there must be consequences. There are no consequences in this world. That is a simple, logical approach to the idea of some other world. Now, in Judaism, we talk about the world of action versus the world of consumption. There's this world here where it's about action, but there's no consumption. Right? If you are the most righteous person on the planet, right, you could also have nothing. You could be destitute. Your kids could be ill. Your spouse could die. You could be faced with famine. You could really have terrible things happen to you. Thus, we live in a world where clearly there isn't a strong link between behavior and kind of godly influence, so to speak, as how God influences you. That's clear. I don't think I want to make the argument contrary. Thus, by methods of that simple syllogism, it's clear that there must be some other locale where people are treated in respect to how they behave. Like that's a simple logical approach to this issue. Now, we spoke about a few weeks ago here that the Talmud brings about 25 sources from the Torah of the existence of this other world. And it's a core premise of Judaism. Maimonides writes that if you don't believe in the idea of reward and punishment, and he breaks it down to 4 categories, but one of them obviously being the existence of this other world. If you don't believe in that, you got no part of the Jewish people. He says, you're excluding yourself from the Jewish people. And it's an important point. He's not just saying you're out of the Jewish people. What he's saying is you're out of the loop of the Jewish mission, of the Jewish insight, of the idea of purpose in the world. If we could give a class on this, I think we would do classes on analyzing the 13 principles of faith of Maimonides. But if you break those down, it's essentially, he's telling you these are principles of faith because this is what underpins our entire Weltanschauung, right? Which means world philosophy or perspective. Because if what does it mean to be Jewish? It means to be part of a universal vision for what has to happen with humanity, what has to happen with the world. The idea of tikkun olam, right? What does that mean? It's something so grand. It means that there is this tremendous mission that has to happen, and we're going to be the ones standing at the forefront of this mission. Okay? But if someone says, hey, there's no purpose in the world, well, then you're essentially saying, I am checking out of the Jewish people. That's what it says. If you don't believe in these 13 principles, these 13 principles are all necessary for us to have Torah, and thus for us to have purpose, and thus for the Jewish nation to be Jewish, to be defined as a Jew. Thus, perhaps when it says we study Torah, we gain reward, we just simply, we become better people, and thus that behavior is reflected in reward, simply, potentially. Or perhaps it can mean that we get reward in other ways. As we elaborated last time, we'll skip it. We'll skip the elaboration. Moving on to number 4, to sharpen and hone the mind, there is nothing that is more challenging than Torah study, or potentially. The Torah is very malleable in it that it could connect with everyone. You know, at Mount Sinai, the Talmud says that there was 600,000 separate Mount Sinai experiences. Why? 600,000 people there. We do find in the sources that everyone's soul was there as well. And even non-Jews were there as well, which is interesting. But why would there be 600,000 experiences? It's just got to be, there's one and everyone experiences the same thing. The answer is that no, the Torah can connect to us at our level. If you know nothing about anything, if you have a little kid, you teach him Torah on his level. You know, you say, you got to honor your parents, something like that. That's from the Torah. You know, you say, do to someone else. Like, you don't want your brother to take away your blanket. Why would you take away your sibling's blanket? Well, what is that? That's one of the principles of Torah. That you don't want to be done to you, don't do to other people. Right? You're essentially telling a core element of Judaism, of Torah, to a small child who's 2 years old. And then you have sages that have studied Torah their entire lives. They put in a lot of those millions of hours, and they're still studying Torah. You know, and I bring you people to yeshivas in Israel. It'll be the most mind-blowing experience of your life if you ever do it. I don't know about mind-blowing. I don't know, with VR now, who knows? But it'll be a transformational experience. Like imagine walking into a building, okay? You walk up some steps, you're in an enormous room, auditorium, and people are sitting, not in chairs like this. Looks literally like the most comfortable couch on the planet compared to the chairs people are sitting on. You know, benches, these old rickety benches, and then yeshiva students, each the 2 feet separating each bench, like nothing. You gotta, if you want to actually go to the bathroom, it's like worse than in a stadium. You know, like you have to pivot your way out. Now, you walk in, and everyone has a little stender. What's a stender? A stender is this little stand, a little lectern that is just one of the marvels of engineering, that it's perfectly designed to hold your book whether you're sitting or standing. If you're sitting, you can lean it back against you, and if you're standing, it goes up, so to speak. Brilliant. So imagine seeing 1,000 young men, and a lot of old men sometimes, it depends what yeshiva you're in this room. Each one got the same book, got a book and a study partner. And if you've been to a library, it's really quiet, right? The first thing you'll notice is how loud it is. I'll tell you, I was yeshiva, the biggest yeshiva in the world is in Israel. I was a member there for several years. I'm in the yeshiva, and we were in. They have a bunch of different base medrashes. Base medrash means a house of study, like where people study. And I was in one of them that had like a really low ceiling, and it was like almost like a long cylinder, and the cacophonies that were bouncing off the walls there, the sound, the din. I remember thinking this. I had a study partner. He's sitting 12 inches away from me. Okay, we're studying. We're trying to study. I can't hear what he's saying, and he can't hear what I'm saying, and I'm screaming, and the guy he's not more than 18 inches away from me. He's much closer than Alexei is from me right now, and I can't hear what he's saying. And I'm next to the door, so I'm next to the entrance, so to speak, where I don't have the sounds coming from every side. And I remember
so long to study the song.
Maybe and I'm sitting there, and I remember going home once, and I was hoarse. And not because I went to like a ball game or something. I just was studying Talmud, and we didn't take any breaks. So you do 4 hours of screaming at the top of your lungs just so he can hear you, and then you're hoarse, right? But just the intensity of the intellectual pursuit is astounding. Like 1,000 seats, every single one of them is taken. You know why? Because there's 1,200 people that could potentially sit there. So it's basically the biggest game of musical chairs in the world. Right? The yeshiva has a philosophy that you always have, if there's 6,000 to 7,000 students in the yeshiva, you always have between 4 and 7% less chairs and seats than people. So that way, every single room is completely full. And if you're not there after 20 minutes, someone else takes your seat for the rest of the day. So everyone makes sure they got to be there in time. And then the guys that don't have a seat and are not able to pilfer someone else's seat, you know what they do? They take their chair and their stender, and they drag it and find some sort of stairwell, and they sit under the stairwell. And that's what you're going to do. You walk the stairs, like, people are sitting in the stairwells. What is going on in this place? What's the deal? You know, people studying outside, inside, between benches. It was insane. You know, but you know, it's just a remarkable place. You know, and what are they studying? They're studying the ancient texts. What's the deal with these people? They're studying 2,000-year-old texts. The truth is, nothing hones your mind more than that. And if only for that. By the way, in South, I read this recently. There's a whole article. Google it. In South Korea, they're obsessed with the Talmud. Apparently, they were asked, like, why are Jews so successful in so many different fields? And they did the research and like, well, the Jews have been studying, like, honing their minds and, like, you know, just incrementally becoming more intelligent generation after generation because they were studying this Talmud all the time. And despite being oppressed and mistreated and marginalized in every way, they still are able to be creative and intelligent. They're able to amass information and organize it and, you know, be creative and innovative. Like, and they said, hey, let's get ourselves some Talmud. So apparently, I don't know the details about it, but apparently they have, anyone heard about this?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Apparently this is a huge thing where they study Talmud.
They're teaching it in grade
To
school.
try to be
In grade school.
Really?
Yeah, it's insane.
The kids Talmud.
I've heard
It's
Harvard
amazing.
Law School teaches Talmud just about everything.
Really?
The concept of law through Talmud.
They have their divinity school right there.
What's that?
Doesn't Harvard have a divinity school?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing about Harvard is they probably don't teach. They probably say no, Talmud is Talmud. Nothing to do with, you know. There's like the separation of church and state. Well, a synagogue in law. I don't know.
Yeah.
Either way, so it's something very eye opening. But even Talmud, I want to point this out. Like even Talmud, you could study Talmud, and on a very superficial level, you study Talmud and you just read the Talmud and see what it says. And read it, understand it, maybe read one or two commentaries, and move on. Or you could literally spend months on a single page and going deeper and deeper and deeper. So there's the concept of the horizontal learning versus the vertical learning. You know, it was someone once asked the question of the Chazon Ish, what is the definition of a Talmid Chacham? Anyone heard the term Talmid Chacham? Talmid Chacham is the Jewish word for a Torah scholar. Talmid Chacham, which actually incidentally means, Talmud means a student. Chacham means a wise person. He's like a wise person who's still a student. But anyhow, that's the terminology for a wise person, a scholar, a Talmid Chacham. So someone asked Chazon Ish, how would you define a Talmid Chacham? What does that mean? So he says, someone who's able to study 40 pages of Talmud in one day, and able to study a single page of Talmud over 40 days. Now, you guys are like, 40 pages, I can read 40 pages. Who can read 40 pages? Right? I don't know if there's a person in the Western Hemisphere that can study 40 pages of Talmud in a single day. Like, most people, like, if you spend your first day of Talmud, and you want to actually understand, like, some Talmuds are a little bit easier, but if you get like one of those really intricate, knotty discussions, you could spend weeks just to try to understand just the basic flow of one page or one paragraph, or 12 lines of Talmud. The great scholar is able to study 40 pages of Talmud in a single day, but also, conversely, able to study in 40 days, spend all of his 40 days on one page of Talmud. And how's that possible? You either study it, right? If you're doing 40 pages of Talmud in a single day, well, you're doing 40 pages of Talmud in a single day. That's it. Right? That's your pace that you're moving at. How could you possibly slow it down? Well, you're going to read it backwards? You're just going to slow down? Right? Just read every word 800 times? Well, what are you going to do? But the answer is because we have no idea what this means. This is the most malleable and study that we can possibly do. On one end, yes, there's a superficial or like a surface level studying, but the more you go deeper into a discussion, the more it gets deeper. That's the way the scripture itself defines the Torah as arucha me'eretz mido rechav miniyam. Right? It's deeper than the ocean. That's the definition that says the scripture about the Torah itself. Broader than the land. Okay? So you go drive. I drove through these United States last week. This is a very broad and expansive land. It is vast. I can assure you. right? It's enormous. As far as I can see in every direction, that's what you have. With land, that's what you have a Torah. As far as I can see, in breadth, but in depth as well. It's pretty incredible. And it's pretty incredible that it has such lasting vitality to this day. Let's quickly go through just the headlines. I want to get to some new material here. To achieve unbiased intellect, we have a tendency to have perverted intellect. We have a tendency to have our desired outcome in mind when we engage on intellectual pursuit. So if you say, I want X, if you're a defense attorney, I remember I was thinking, I had a conversation with him recently. He's an expert witness. He's an expert witness. That's what he does. Well, one of the things that he does. He's an expert witness for high-profile legal cases. So he was talking about someone who was accused of a crime, or someone who committed a crime allegedly. And he was sure, and he's in prison, and now they want to get him out of prison. So family, very, very wealthy family, is hiring him to be part of their team to try to get a retrial or a mistrial or whatever. So he was asking me a question because he wanted to have some Talmudic source in something. But I was saying, well, what if the guy actually did it? And to him, it didn't even register to him. He said, of course the guy's innocent. And that's what a good defense attorney does. You have a presupposition of innocence, and then you figure out how do you get to the destination? Well, that's what defines your quality as an attorney. But the destination is clear. This person is not guilty. Right? That's what you have to do. Right? But unfortunately, in our other pursuits, where we're not acting as a defense attorney, when we need the soundest of judgment, right, we have to use sound mind, sound intelligence, sound intellect. And we have it potentially, but we're very likely to be duped and to be perverted and to be drawn in the way that we really want, so to speak. Right? If you have a quandary and you want to figure out which one is the right way to do, right? One of them is a lot easier and one of them is a lot harder. I'm sure that this is something that programmers encounter every single day. You have two approaches. Which one should we do? We should do the one that is easier, less of a schlep, or we do the one that is maybe the right one.
Easier when you get a paycheck.
Yeah, well, okay. But this is something you're familiar with, and then you're like, I want to go home already, right? I'll do that, and you give yourself some justification for your behavior. You're able to assuage your behavior with your intelligence because that is just the human condition. And we're able to convince ourselves of something that is logical when it is really just what we want. But the Torah teaches us... Is the door open again there? You guys know I have this mission gas. So the Torah teaches us that it compels us. Thank you so much. I'm so weird. Sorry, I have a idiosyncratic eccentricity. I have a few of them, but one of them is doors closed, especially bathroom doors. Anyhow, sorry. Huh? I just close the door and I'm good. To empower and awaken the soul, and then to counteract our Yetzer Hara in three ways. Number one, to channel it. Number two, to forget it. Number three, to eliminate it. To achieve love of God and to fix character. Let us start with number 12. To achieve Tikkun Olam. Now, we kind of hinted at this. Right? When we study Torah, right, we're essentially doing it's kind of a gateway to a lot of different things. When you study Torah, it's going to bring perfecting the world. Perfecting the world, if you had to synthesize the Jewish mission in two words, it would be Tikkun Olam, because that's what it's all about. And how does the Talmud define Tikkun Olam for how does the Talmud define our role as the Jewish people in Tikkun Olam? One word, Torah. Via our activities in Torah, that is how we perfect the world. Now, how does that work? Which is an interesting idea. I think that there's a few ways that perhaps it works. Perhaps when we study Torah, well, we're studying the Word of God and we're bringing the idea of God into the world. That's probably the simplest understanding. But either way, I think if we ask most Jews who are associated with Judaism in some way, how would you define the Jewish mission in the world. And they would probably say tikkun. More often than not, you'd hear tikkun olam. I think that's a fair argument. How does the Talmud define our role as a nation, tikkun olam? One word, Torah. Essentially, it's telling us via Torah. It might be observance of Torah. It might be studying of Torah. Or maybe it's both. That is how we do it. So if you want to ask, why are we studying Torah? A very good answer would be tikkun olam. I want to move on to the next one here because we're going to finish in time today. And this one, I think, maybe be a little controversial. We'll get into the arguments here. Who's ready for some polemic? Anybody?
We never
Okay.
talked about abortion this week.
Oh, yeah. So, in Israel today, there is a major, well, it's not today, but there's a major issue of controversy in the secular and religious camps, or between the secular and religious camps. I would say perhaps one of the most, perhaps the most polarizing issue, political and religious issue in Israel, is the idea of these yeshiva students not going to the army. Now, as you may or may not, yeshiva students not going to the army. Yes. And we have someone who has experience in Israel, and would you agree that's one of the critical issues of controversy in the world? Would you? Yeah? Sounds about right?
It rises once a couple of years.
Right. So it was big, like they thought it was a big political issue a couple of years ago. They passed legislation, they revoked legislation. But either way, this is the way it's been. It's been since 1948, essentially. There has been a provision in the law of the land. The law of the land is mandatory conscription of men and women. Right? All men and all women. And in fact, Israel is the only country in the entire world that has mandatory conscription of women, which is very interesting. Doesn't seem like so. I guess maybe it is progressive, right? But Israel is the only country that has mandatory conscription of women. It's possible that their military needs just per capita are that great, maybe. But either way, that's the law. Mandatory, because you're 18 years old, you're going to the army. Now, even in Tel Aviv, 50% of the people don't go to the army for one reason or the other. But either way, that's the way it is in Israel. My dad's Israeli. My dad went to the army. I actually did it 4 years back in the day. You're 18 to 21, you're in the army. That's the way it is. Afterwards, you want to go to college, fantastic. You want to go to backpack in America. You want to go sell Dead Sea stuff in the Memorial City Mall, right? Whatever. You're on your own. Now, that's the way it is. In 1948, they were instituted that full-time yeshiva students, someone that's Torah to umanato, someone who's Torah study, that's what he does, they're exempt. Well, they're not. It's not technically exempt. They could defer it. But they can defer it, and once they defer it till they're 26, if you could defer, then you're off the hook, so to speak.
So are they doing it to get out of service?
Well, maybe there's some people that are just gaming the system. That there's always going to be people gaming the system. I know that my dad was a yeshiva student, and his dad had a yeshiva. My grandfather had a yeshiva, and my father wasn't cut out for full-time study. He wasn't, still isn't, right? Is they just not cut from the same, got cut from the same cloth, what they say? He just not, it's not for him. And then he's 18 years old, and he went to one yeshiva, ended up in a different yeshiva, and now he's like, he was done with yeshiva. Fantastic. So he went to his father and says, listen, technically if I register in your yeshiva, I'll be able to be exempt from the army, or at least defer from the army, and then, So, hey, wink, wink, can we do something like that? And his father said, absolutely not. Of course not. He says, if you're not in yeshiva, you go to the army. And I think that's probably the prevailing perspective. Of course, there's some people.
Do something.
Yeah, of course, there's some people that game the system, but like in everything, But remember, you can't get a job if you're officially registered in yeshiva as full-time studying. You can't actually get a job. You can't. Let's see, you work under the table, whatever, black market, maybe, I don't know. But it's not that easy to just say, oh, I'm in yeshiva, and then go off and do whatever it is that you would want. You can't go to you won't be able to go to university as well. If you're officially registered in yeshiva, you can't be registered in yeshiva full time and also go to university. But either way, that's the way it is. Full-time yeshiva students, they're exempt from the army, and that's the way it has always been. Now, the problem is that there's a very legitimate question. It's a deep and sensitive moral question. That there's, two neighbors. One of them their child is going to yeshiva, and he's, just not exactly on the, the enemy lines. And the other one was the son's not going to yeshiva, and they're in Gaza. And they're going door to door looking for terrorists, imperiling their lives for the sake of the nation. Is that really fear? Is it fear that one child is safely ensconced in the yeshiva, far away from any rockets? Is that fear? And that, in fact, this is it's a very hard question to answer. And I'm not trying to take a stance on the issue at all. I'm just trying to tell you that this has been at the forefront. Even I found a letter online that Ben Gurion wrote about this issue. He's like, even though he spearheaded the effort to allow yeshiva students to defer army service, but he wrote a letter to the chief rabbi of Israel at the time. He says, "Listen, I don't know. It's a very grave question to try to ask. Is it really fear? There's many Israeli soldiers died in combat, and what did they die for? They died for country. Is it fear that some Jews, some Israelis are obligated in that, and if they don't do that, they go to prison if you try to dodge the army, while other Israelis are able to just stay in yeshiva? That is a very it's a very polarizing issue, because on one hand you have the people that are sending their kids to the army, and or people themselves that go to the army, they don't see the value of Torah study. They say, "Wait a minute, everyone's studying Torah? You're studying ancient books, and this is what you're doing? You're a parasite." That's what they call them. They call them parasites in the secular. Some people in the secular portion of society say these are parasites. They're living off our hard work. They're not doing anything to benefit society. What could possibly be the perspective of the people? Well, what's the argument? What's the justification of saying we're going to study Torah and we're going to let everyone else fight our battles? So now, once again, I want to make it very clear. I'm not taking a stance on the issue. I'm just saying that it's important for everyone to understand what is the rationalization of the people that are saying we're studying Torah. And you're not going to force us to go to the army. And you know why? Because we are doing more for the safety and security of the citizens of Israel than the people on the front lines. That is their argument. Well, that's pretty remarkable. But this brings us to number 13, and that is to save our brethren, Israel, and the world from destruction. Via Torah study, this is how number 13 goes. Via Torah study, when you study Torah, when any Jew studies Torah, when someone, especially someone who dedicates their life to Torah study, they are saving the world from destruction, they're saving the Jewish people and Israel from peril. Well, that's a pretty bold statement, right? Don't you think? But essentially the argument goes, this is the argument of the people who are in favor of continued deferment of army service for yeshiva students. The argument is, it's not the responsibility of yeshiva students to take care for the well-being of the state. It's the opposite. It is their responsibility, and they're doing more than anyone else. Crazy idea, of course. They don't know how to shoot a gun. Most yeshiva students, they wouldn't know what to do with the gun. They wouldn't know which side to hold that. They have no idea. How are they protecting it? So this is this idea, and I have a whole series of sources that for example, one that Ben and I learned together, Ben 1.0, that is, and the Talmud says that God made a pact with the world. God created the world conditionally. It's a condition. What's that? If you study Torah, great. If not, I'm taking it all back. We're returning the clock. It's before time and space and matter, and we're all done. That's what it says. One source. Another source is actually. Go ahead.
That argument, they argue that even against just putting off yeshiva for a couple of years.
Yeah. So. Well, their argument is that. Let me. First of all, there's the Hester program, if you heard about that. Hester means like an agreement. Hester, like where it's kind of like a compromise. It's like 5-year plan. 14 months or 18 months, I don't know the exact details, in the army, and the rest of the time in yeshiva, and they go back and forth. So there are some people that try to kind of do both. There are, I'm sure there are those that go to the army after yeshiva, a lot of those, and I'm sure there has been someone that goes to yeshiva after the army. So those are nice ways to kind of do both. But the argument that they would present is that it's not like the army is something which is more important than yeshiva. So your argument is, hey, go to the army, do your dues, so to speak, and then go to yeshiva. They're saying, no, I'm doing my dues in yeshiva. So why would you go to the army when you could do even more to save the country by going to yeshiva? Which is obviously a crazy idea. But their argument is based upon the idea that when we study Torah, we're preventing conflict. That the conflict only comes because there's lack of studying Torah study. Thus, it's even more important than trying to deal and combat with the conflict is to prevent the conflict. That's the rationale. Another source. This is a verse.
Can I ask a
Go
question?
ahead.
This is an ignorant question about yeshivas.
Never.
Is there, in Israel, is there Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox?
So in Israel, there's predominantly, it's not even called Orthodox, but there's a small conservative and also a small Reform contingency in Israel.
Do they have yeshivas also?
They have, but it's very, very small, exceedingly small. Even in the United States, besides for Hebrew in college, but how many students are in Hebrew in college? How many students are there in JTS in Manhattan? I don't know, maybe 100. Even more than 100 students in JTS. I don't know. I don't think so. So it's not really comparable. I'm sorry.
That's Romney.
Yeah, like how many full-time students are there? I don't know. And studying Torah. I don't know if you would even classify as yeshiva. A lot of them are just there for cantorial school or rabbinic school or whatever.
I was just wondering if they had the same exceptions as the Orthodox.
I'm sure they would. If it's a full-time.
They tried to pass legislation just in the last couple of years and it didn't pass. We're talking about 50 people. I mean, it's
exceedingly small. In fact, it's actually this is another very controversial issue, but in Israel, I even mentioned this once before. In Israel, the rabbinate, they control and they streamline a lot of the life cycle events. So you have in the United States, you have the conservative movements, network of synagogues and schools and conversion and all that, and there's standards for everything. You have the Reform, and you have some renegade rabbis doing whatever they want, and you have the Orthodox, and even amongst the Orthodox, there's a very nice spectrum. While in Israel, there is governmental oversight in the form of the rabbinate, and they control marriage and divorce, for example, and they control conversion. So, in essence, even though it's controversial, it's not egalitarian on one hand, and no one's happy because unless you're, almost no one's happy because a lot of people would say, well, it's not religious enough, so to speak, and the Reform are not happy because they're not willing to be as flexible. But on the other hand, at least you know what you know. You know that there is a certain universal standard. National standards for all issues of kosher, of synagogues, etc., etc.
How long is a typical person in yeshiva? I mean, because you said 18 to 26, 8 years.
So it varies. Typically, it varies tremendously. Some people are in yeshiva for a yeshiva high school, and that's it. That's the last time they ever see the inside of a beis medrash. There's some people that are in their 60s. I know I met people in their 60s, especially in the yeshiva that I was in, that they haven't stopped studying for years and years and years. They're still studying. They're full-time career scholars. And they're not doing it to try to write some sort of thesis or doctrine. They want to study.
So question, how are they earning their living?
So either their wife works, or they have some side business, or they hustle, or they tutor kids. I don't know what they do, but it's the very good question.
So I
That's
get to be a full-time student and a full-time.
yeah. But there are some people that do it.
Yeah, but it's not like 12 hours a day. Right?
Sometimes it's 18. I'm not even joking. I'm not even joking, guys.
No, I know you're not.
I'm being entirely serious. Like it is a lifelong dedication.
What does it cost?
Huh?
What does it cost?
Well, most yeshivas they'll take you even if you don't pay anything. They may have a salary. I'm sorry, not a salary, a tuition, but the yeshivas they're not in the business of making money as opposed to universities. Okay, I said it. Everyone knows it's true, and I said it. They're in the business of teaching Torah, and therefore they're not going to say, "Oh, you can study Torah because you didn't pay enough money for it." It's kind of like I think it's going to be a condemnation of a lot of American shuls that charge their membership and they make participation in core synagogue programs contingent on membership, and they have bouncers at the doors. And it's crazy. You think about it. They put bouncers at the doors on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur to make sure people that don't have tickets don't get in. Who else would do that?
Hillel, the story of how he.
Yeah, well, Hillel is a good question, right? Yeah, Hillel, he went to the ceiling.
Yeah, he couldn't afford it, and then they saw him like, okay, it's worth.
Tell a story.
Yeah, great sandwiches, by the way.
Huh?
Hillel sandwiches.
Oh yeah, Hillel raps. So tell a story, Hillel.
Well, from what I know, it's in I guess in the past the only way to get into the yeshiva study you had to pay, and it was kind of expensive, so he couldn't afford it. And like you said,
So every day he would take half his money.
Right.
Hillel was a wood chopper. That's what he did, and he was, by the way, Hillel became the Nasi, became the president of the Jewish people. But he started off his career. He was very poor. Go ahead. He'd take every day. He would take half his money and give half of it for his family's presence and half of it to get admission to the to the house of scholarship.
So basically,
One day he didn't have any money, and
he had money to let him in. So he basically he got on he climbed up to the roof and the ceiling, and he basically listened to the study and everything else. And I think it was so cold. I think it snowed. It was like the only time that it snowed or something like that.
yeah.
And he either fell asleep or he kind of froze or something.
Yeah,
and
then they noticed the light.
the light,
the light, exactly.
The light, yeah.
Pretty crazy story.
Yeah,
So yes, that's a good question. Why are they charging?
And then they kind of it's they kind of rethought the whole idea of the cost, and I think
Yeah. But actually, it does flip. The idea of a kollel is where students who are veteran students, they actually receive a stipend from the yeshiva. It's a nominal stipend. It's a pittance, but it's something. So it's not going to cost them money. It's actually they're going to get something for it. I remember so it's usually typically after a student would get married, they join the kollel and then they get a stipend. I remember when I first got married, so I was in kollel in Israel, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm getting paid, right? What do you think they get paid in a month? In the kollel. No, not the kollel in Houston. That's fancy kollel.
$20.
Huh? No, it was 450 shekels. Essentially, $100. That's not paying for anything. I assure you. Even in Israel, where the cost, where the cost of living is, and they were usually 4 to 6 months late because they had to fundraise all the money for him. Yes, so it's not exactly a place where people go to get wealthy. Either way, the Talmud additionally says, back to item number 13, the Talmud says that it describes someone who has no portion of the world to come. And there's a term for it, because one of the people that has no portion of the world to come is the apikoros. And the Talmud says, well, what's an apikoros? So one of the answers of the Talmud is that an apikoros is someone who says, what did the rabbis do for us? What are they wasting their time studying ancient texts? What a waste of time. Okay? Someone who says that has no portion of world to come. Why? And Rashi points out that they don't realize that the world is only existing in merit of some old crusty rabbis in Israel studying Torah. We're sitting here in relative comfort, in great comfort actually for me, this couch. Right? And we have no idea that there are people going to bat for us. Right? There are people literally whose job is to make sure that the entire world doesn't just implode. That's what they do. And then we go and say, well, what are they doing for us? What are they doing for society? Right? They're parasites. And it's the exact opposite. The world is only there from, in their merit. I remember in 2006, there was a big war, a 34-day war in Lebanon. If you guys remember. 2006? So many wars that you have to keep track of which one's which. But basically, the war started with two soldiers were kidnapped. They weren't actually kidnapped, they were actually killed, but then they took their bodies and they said, oh, we have them, they're still alive. And then they started a war, started sending rockets from Lebanon, Hezbollah sending rockets. And this was at the end of the semester. It's actually right now in Israel is the end of the semester for the yeshiva. And there's a war going on. So, and it's getting closer and closer to the time where everyone's on break, and you kind of have to unwind, but the yeshiva schedule is very rigorous. And I was looking forward to their vacation and planning it, but there's a war going on. So I remember the Rosh Yeshiva, he gave a speech, and he said, what are we doing? This is our war. Essentially, this war is being won or lost because of us. And he said, I want to make sure that we are doing our job, our responsibility to make sure that this war is successful. I want every student at the yeshiva to write. I told you about this. Did I mention this before?
Did every?
No. He said, I want everyone to write a Talmudical essay. Right? Why? And he brought some source that says that the best kind of Torah study for saving humanity and the Jewish people is Chidushei Torah, Torah novelay, novel ideas of Torah. And I remember walking into his office, and he had stacks, just stacks and stacks and stacks of contributions, of Torah contributions that people gave to him. Pretty remarkable. So I think that this is really at the core of the issue, and obviously, if you don't understand it, if you've never heard this issue, then and you want to encounter or engage in the debate, the political debate, you have no idea what the rationale is from one side of the issue. Like if you've never heard of this idea, then it sounds ludicrous. But we have many sources. I brought you three sources here that talk about this idea that Torah study is what saves the world from destruction. There was in Volozhin. Volozhin is a city in Lithuania. And the first modern yeshiva was established in Volozhin. And they had a 24/7, 365 schedule of someone studying Torah. So if you were a student of yeshiva Volozhin, they would give you at the beginning of a week, they would say, okay, from 4 to 7 on Monday night is your job at the post. Right? You and your study mate. You have to make sure at that time, right, irrespective of the normal yeshiva schedule, you have to be studying. Why? Because there always has to be 24/7, 365 someone studying. Why? Because we're saving the world. And we can't take a second off. We take a second off, the world's done. And for years and years and years, that's what they did in the yeshiva there. I always say, thank God there's Jews in America and Jews in Israel and Jews in Europe and some Jews in Asia. Why? Because then we always have at one point in time because of the change. Because the change. Yeah. There was a story about Rabbi Kamenetsky, who was my great uncle and my namesake. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in the United States and in Europe as well. But it was after Yom Kippur. And after Yom Kippur, the first thing everyone wants to do after Yom Kippur is engorge themselves with food. Right? You haven't eaten for 26 hours. You're pretty hungry. And Rabbi Kamenetsky, the great rabbi, he shows up 2 hours late for the breakfast meal. no one can figure out why. So someone figured out that what he does is, right after Yom Kippur, he studies for 2 hours. Why? Because he knows that this is the most vulnerable time for the world. Because everyone else is saying, let's eat, right? So this is the time when it's important for us to study, and therefore we're going to make sure that we, he said 2 hours, at least for 2 hours, make sure I got, put the world on my shoulders, so to speak. But this is an incredible idea, I think. I think it's transformational. Like it just ups the ante. It's like, what do we do when we study Torah? We're saving the world, Of course, it has the political implications, I think, or at least it should be part of the debate, and that's actually very interesting because even the opponents of this across-the-board blanket deference policy in Israel, even they concede that there should always be a yearly allowance of about 1,800 students that should be allowed to go to yeshiva, which is incredible. Like, if you say that they're doing nothing, then they're doing nothing. They're not saying, right? Even the secular approach to the issue, they still appreciate this idea, I think, and that the importance of always having Jews that are dedicated to perpetuating Judaism and Torah.
But I think that the difference might be, and correct me if I'm wrong, the students who are in yeshiva, they're taking more literally. Like, they're literally saving the world by studying Torah.
That's their position. That's
And
right.
the secular are saying it's very symbolic, and it's a nice spiritual thing to know that it's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Direct benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think that the secular position can also be that it's not necessarily about saving the world; it's about perpetuating Judaism. So there's other elements to it as well. Moving right along, number 14. And we have 20, 22, 23. I'm going to go through them really quickly because I don't want to keep you guys here too long. This is to create new worlds. I think that our perspective is that, God's in control and we're just these puppets. I remember there was once this person trying to make the argument, this really deep, convoluted philosophical argument, that we're just here. It's like a dream. We don't really matter. We don't really matter. It's just it's as if we're in a dream and we're not real. Only God's real. And I think there's an element of truth to that because only we're told is the very baseline of Jewish theology is that only God has lasting value. Why? Because everything is dependent on God. God's not dependent on anything. Right? Once you establish that principle, well, then only God matters, really. But I think that misses a crucial point, and that is the idea of God partnering with us. We say in the verse, Hashamayim, Shamayim Lashem. Thank you. The heavens are for God, and land is for us. This is our place. The idea being that as humans, we have the responsibility and the opportunity to do things good or bad. That's the idea of our free will. And thus, our actions matter. So we say that God partners with us in deciding what happens in the world. Right? Who is in charge of the world? Well, of course, God's in control. But our actions, good or bad, impact what happens to us in the world. So the idea of our actions really making a difference, we find in regards to Torah, in the Talmud, where it says that Adam was upset. I don't get the details of this Talmudic analysis, but it says that Adam was upset because he wasn't able to create worlds. Only via Torah do you create worlds. So this is an idea. I don't know exactly what it means, and I have some suspicions what it means. But the idea is that via Torah study, you're able to create worlds. You are essentially playing God, so to speak. What do you mean? God creates worlds. What are you doing? We're puppets. No, we're not puppets. We're creators of worlds via our Torah study.
Because if the world was created with the Torah,
Thus, finish the point.
so
Torah
when
study.
we study Torah, we're creating worlds through studying Torah.
Yeah, but the problem is that how do you quantify that? What are these worlds? I agree with you 1,000%.
I don't know what the worlds are.
I don't know either. I have a suspicion, but I'm putting that out as an independent idea just out there. But there's this idea of creating worlds, and number 15, I'm going to say, is going to be something which perhaps is the meaning behind it, and that is that when we do mitzvahs, we create spiritual realities. I'll tell you what I mean by this. Ki lo al alechem levad yechya ha'adam. The verse says that it's awesome. That man cannot subsist on bread alone. Right? What else does man need? This is from Deuteronomy 8:3. The word of God. Right? What it's saying is that we have a misperception of what the nutrition that we need. Right? We think we need bread, and water, and shelter. And what's that? Not Pascal. What's the other guy? He says, shelter and water and security. Maslow Pascal. Sorry, I mixed up. Maslow's. What's it called? The principles or pyramid? Maslow's pyramid. Thank you. Basic needs, right? So that's what we think. We need bread and water. We need oxygen and safety and whatever. The verse in Deuteronomy. This is the Torah. This is not the rabbis inventing it, right? It says that you don't. It's more than that. You need the Word of God.
Well, that's exactly what he's saying. He's saying you cannot study science, Torah, whatever, if you're hungry. Like that's
true.
What the pyramid is saying.
Well, right, but okay, that's true. But does the pyramid include
No, he was
Torah
just
study?
Jew.
Okay, so then it doesn't. So then it is someone in opposition. And now, so what does this mean? There's many sources to this. But the idea is as follows. We have a body, we have a soul. Body has needs. Some bodies are more needed than others, as we well know. And you're like, I need a coffee. Well, no, your body needs a coffee, right? But soul has needs as well. Soul has an agenda as much as our body does. Our problem is that we don't feel our soul. We have no sensory relationship with our soul. So we have no idea what our soul actually needs and wants. Right? It's possible that we're suffocating our soul and we'll never know. Or our soul is very happy and we have no idea. Because we're not linked in a sensory way. We don't feel what our soul feels. So if your soul was depressed, you wouldn't know it. If your soul was delighted, you wouldn't know it. If your soul is hungry, you wouldn't know it. And you have no idea how to satiate. However, the Torah is telling us that man is his body and soul. Your body only needs bread. Your soul needs Torah. Now, there's going to be a time where you're not going to feel your body and you're only going to feel your soul, where the relationship is going to be reversed. And that's what we call Olam Haba, this next world, where your soul first and you don't even feel your body. And the agenda of the body is inconsequential, just like for most people, the agenda of the soul is inconsequential in this world. And then what are you going to eat? We're going to go to the store? There's no stores. You know what you eat? You eat what you create here. Here is the place where we create the sustenance that we're going to live upon when in a place where only spiritual sustenance matters. That's the only thing that has any value. That's the only thing that we need. Thus, when we do a mitzvah, right, we create a little sandwich. Right? We're creating a sandwich, and that sandwich will have with us, it's figurative, not a literal sandwich. But it's like, what kind of sandwich? Is it a deli sandwich? I don't like sandwiches. I like pizza. Right? That's what we're doing. You're creating a certain spiritual reality, and that will nourish your soul for eternity. Right? You study Torah. You're like, I'm studying Torah. There's no relevance. Well, it does have relevance in a very, very practical way, but in a very different world than the world we're in today. Right? The only way for you to make sure that you're not starving hungry, right, when you come to this other world, is to make sure that you are ready for it. So essentially, perhaps when we say when you study Torah, you're creating a world, what it means you're creating this environment in which that's what you're going to live in. You have what you earn. What you don't earn, you don't have. the way the Talmud describes it, it says, whoever works on Erev Shabbos, whoever works on Shabbos, before Shabbos, in Shabbos Eve, right? Then you have something to eat on Shabbos. If someone says, you know what, I'm not going to cook till Shabbos. I'm not going to cook. And what happens? Shabbos comes, you can't cook anymore, and you have nothing to eat. Same thing is that now it's Erev Shabbos. Now it's prior to Shabbos. Now is the time where you prepare. You're not consuming now. You consume later. What if you don't prepare? You have nothing to consume. Right? How do you prepare? What you know what you do? You create as many sandwiches as you possibly can. Get some variety. Learn lots of different Talmud. Every mitzvah, 613 mitzvahs. Each one of them is a different variety. The 613 needs that we have. In fact, we're told that the 613 mitzvahs corresponding to 248 limbs and 365 sinews. What it's essentially telling us that if you do all the mitzvahs, then you have the perfect you for the next world. You're good to go. You're complete. You got all your limbs intact, and all your sinews all ready to go. What's it telling you? It's telling you that you're ready to go. You're fully formed. Well, what happens if someone says, you know what, I'm not doing one mitzvah. Okay, then you're not fully formed. You're saying, I don't want the left index finger. Right? I don't want to fulfill this mitzvah. You're running away from what it is that's going to compose you, this world that you're creating, in some other reality. And then you're going to come to that reality and say, dude, why does everyone have elbows? And mine is like this. Well, okay, just you didn't do whatever mitzvah brought that reality to you. So you say you don't want it. Okay, you don't want it. You don't get it. No, it's obviously very hard for us to visualize this because we have no evidence of this world. Have you seen it? Did you know anyone that went there and came back? I'll see it and believe it. If I see it, I'll believe it. And that's what we think, unfortunately. But the Talmud and the Torah goes out of its way to make this as clear as possible and bring in evidence and logic and all of that to make this idea really penetrate us. But then when we study Torah, we do mitzvahs. What does that actually mean for us? We're creating a world, and this is the kind of world we want to live in. What happens? You get to you don't want to be the only one. It's like when you go to the party. I once at a party. It was a party, and I was the only guy not wearing a tie. I felt so. I was walking around like this, and I was like at the end, at the edge of the room. It was enormous. It was a tent. It was an inauguration party for one of my former yeshivas that I went to. And I was the only guy in the entire, there's 500 people in the building, everyone's wearing a tie, and I don't have one. So probably most people didn't notice it, but it's the most self-conscious thing for me. I have hard times as a registered introvert. I have hard times in social settings to begin with.
You can do that.
What?
Then you can register as an introvert.
Well, they don't show anyone their car.
We never meet. That's very funny.
So you've worn a tie every day since then?
No. It's just that's a weird feeling, right?
See, everybody was looking at you saying, God, I wish I
Actually, I left almost as fast as I possibly could because I felt weird. I felt like I was underdressed or it's a weird feeling, right? So I was thinking what's going to be when we, after 120 years of fruitful life in this world, and we're going to come to sometime in the future. This is according to many, many sources in Judaism. There's going to be a world that we're going to come to, and we're not going to be wearing a tie. And who knows if maybe we're not wearing shoes or something like that. Well, this is obviously figuratively. We're not going to have the very basics that everyone else has. The Talmud says, there's a midrash that says, everyone's going to be jealous from their friend. Everyone's going to be at that time. Really, is this the utopia that I was promised? Everyone's going to be jealous from their friends? Yes, because everyone's going to feel so consumed with agony and grief that his friend, the guy who was the schlepper back on planet Earth, that was the guy that was studying Torah, and look what he has now, and there's nothing that I could possibly do to rectify that. And it's a terrible feeling. Obviously, you can imagine. But what it's telling us, for our purposes, is that via our Torah study, via our mitzvahs at large, what we're doing is a lot more than an isolated act of a mitzvah. It's a lot more. It is a certain reality. That's what the famous Mishnah that says, someone does a mitzvah, any mitzvah, you create an angel. You do a negative, you do a sin, you create a bad angel. It's trying to make this idea real to us, trying to make it tangible to us. When you do a mitzvah, you see nothing. You don't see like on the side, when you have those little games on the iPad, your points go up. When you eat the coins, right? So you see like, oh, look, you don't see that with your mitzvahs. You have no way of analyzing, of having the satisfaction of, I got coins. By the way, it's not like those coins ever translate to like money or anything like that. It's like, but I am on level 612 on Candy Crush. Anyone guilty as charged? I've never played Candy Crush in my life, and I have a policy. If anyone ever offers to give me likes in Candy Crush on Facebook, I unfriend them. That's it. I'm done. It's a good policy, right? It's
There's more games that are more addicting.
but it's pretty addicting.
It's a little bit, yeah.
It just the reason why I'm like I'm so hurt that someone would think that I want lives in Candy Crush. I don't think that's a joke. I don't think actually I unfriended someone, but still, I think I actually did. But moving around, I hope they don't listen to this. I'm like, oh, we're not friends on Facebook? I thought we were. Moving right along, and I think that this, perhaps this is the most important point of them all, is that if we can internalize this idea that our mitzvahs are real and just the same satisfaction that we have when you build something, or when you accomplish something, or you have a good day at work, or you write a nice email and it comes out really nice, or whatever, anything that you do and you see the fruits, you don't have that same appreciation, but in your head, when you try to create the imagery, conjure the imagery of having something real and impactful, like that, then it'll make it obviously much more worthwhile to do, and I think it's transformational. Like this is a different Judaism, I think. Like it's not just let's sing the song, let's sing Hava Nagila, and let's eat matzah and do the Seder plate and light the menorah. Like it's not just perpetuating just tradition. Yes, it's about this tradition, of course, but it has meaning for each and every one of us on a very deep and fundamental element of our life, and more fundamental than anything we could ever imagine. That thought, I think, could change our Judaism. More, just transformational way. Moving right along. I'm going to put 16 and 17 together, just for, and 18 together, to be close to the Almighty. That's 16. 17 would be to return to the Almighty, and lastly, to preserve the relationship we have with the Almighty. So it's essentially three parts of our relationship with God. Number one, to get it. Number two, to preserve it. Number three, to return. And I have sources here, for example, Miyom Shechar Beis Hamikdash, Ein LaKadosh Baruch Hu Dal Am Shalach B'Lvad. It's the thing in the Talmud. It says, from the day that the temple was destroyed, God does not have His Shekhinah rest in any other place aside from the 4 cubits of halacha. If you want to try to recreate the spiritual reality that existed in the temple, the only way to do it is via Torah study. Additionally, you find someone studies Torah, even an individual studies Torah, God is with him. Right? I think that perhaps this is telling us that one of the crucial goals of us as Jews is to develop a connection with God. Well, how do you develop a connection with God? Via Torah study. Number one. Number two, preserve it. How do you preserve it? You have the relationship. You want to make sure the relationship doesn't go downhill. I think this is on a relationships level. A lot of people, they really love their spouses. They really love them. But over time, the love erodes. This is very common. It's very unfortunate, very sad. Now, why would love erode? If you love someone, you love someone. It's like the guy who told his wife, said, listen, they didn't get married. He says, I love you. And if anything ever changed, I'll let you know. And the woman is crying to the counselor. He's like, he doesn't love me. He didn't tell me he loved me. He says, I did. I told you I loved you, and nothing changed. I would notify you if anything changes, you know? But there is a tendency for people to fall in love and then fall out of it. And the question is, well, how do you fall out of something? You know, it's bizarre, right? You fell in, okay, it's like you fell into the, huh?
I fell out of a truck.
You fell out of the truck.
Pushed, but that's another story.
But you fell in love, and then what happened? Well, love doesn't self-perpetuate. If you don't work in it, if you're not constantly deepening it, then it's regressing, and that's a reality. And same thing like that between us and God. We had a relationship on Mount Sinai, you know, and now we got the Torah. And what is the Torah? The Torah is the thermos that preserves our relationship. There's a part of the Haggadah that we say on Passover that is perplexing. And he says as follows. Ilu kirvanu lefnei harsina. You remember the Dayenu part of it? Ilu, right, there you go. Ilu kirvanu lefnei harsina v'lanasanos haTorah Dayenu. Which I'll translate. If only God brought us close to Mount Sinai, but didn't give us the Torah, that would be enough for us. Well, the obvious question is, wait a minute. We got to Mount Sinai, but we didn't get the Torah. It's like, if only I got a ride to the pizza shop, but I didn't get any pizza, I'm good to go. The whole purpose of going to the pizza shop is to eat pizza, right? What? If only we came to Mount Sinai, but we didn't get the Torah, we'd be happy. No, we wouldn't. We'd be miserable. Well, why would you schlep us to Mount Sinai if you don't give us the Torah? That's the question. You guys know the question? Huh? So the answer is that at Mount Sinai, even before the Jews got the Torah, they were in a level of closeness with the Almighty that's been almost unparalleled since. Right? They were scooped out of Egypt with all the miracles of splitting the sea and the manna, all that, on the wings of eagles, and they're at Mount Sinai. They're at the pinnacle and the apex of the relationship with God. That's what it means to be brought to Mount Sinai. It means to have a relationship with God. The Torah, that is the preservation of that relationship. It's the thermos, so to speak, that keeps the heat for years. The way Rabbi Yochanan Levavitz explained this is that, imagine you had a thermos that's able to keep water hot for thousands of years. The advanced technology, you have a thermos, I don't know, it gets lukewarm by noon. Right? You brought your coffee and put it in a thermos, it's lukewarm, right? Like 11 o'clock. Imagine you had a thermos that kept the water piping hot for thousands of years. That's what the Torah is. The Torah maintains, preserves, and nourishes the relationship we have with God at Mount Sinai. If only God brought us to Mount Sinai. If only He had this tremendous relationship with us at that time, didn't give us the Torah, it would be enough for us. Why? Because the relationship of the Torah, or one element of the relationship with the Torah, vis-a-vis its our connection with the Almighty, is that it's going to preserve it. Go ahead, Brad.
When Moses led the Jews to Mount Sinai, did he know that he was going to get the Ten Commandments on his journey?
Yes, I think it was self-understood, yeah. Let me bring you a source for that. I'm pretty sure it's escaping right now, especially under pressure here from you guys, all these piercing guys. But,
Ben?
Well, first of all, 15 commandments.
He's not one tablet.
Yeah. I read about that.
15, 15, 10.
so, but I think it was pretty clear.
So he was on. So they were all on a mission to get the commandments.
Yes.
from God.
Well, commandments, the 10 Commandments is just the experience of Mount Sinai. The Mount Sinai, in the entirety of their stay at Mount Sinai was almost an entire year. That's when Moses was teaching them the Torah. It wasn't just the 10 Commandments were the first day of that. Oh, actually, more precisely, the sixth day of their encampment at Mount Sinai. But they stayed there for an entire year. And what were they doing? They were studying Torah from Moses. God tells Moses, right? Every other verse in the Torah is God tells Moses to tell the Jewish people, right? And that's when did the bulk of that happen at Mount Sinai. Okay, so, and lastly, to return to the Almighty, there's an incredible midrash. It says as follows. It quotes a verse in Yirmiyah, in Jeremiah, where it says And God says that the Jewish people abandoned God and they didn't observe the Torah. And the Midrash explains it by saying that if only the Jewish people abandoned God, but adhere to the Torah. Why? Because if they study the Torah, the illumination of the Torah will bring them back to God. So what it's saying is that in our relationship with God, what's more important than faith? Torah. Why? Because even if you don't have faith, you don't believe in God, you abandon God, but you stick to the Torah, there's some power in the Torah that brings you back to God. Thus, in our relationship with God, 3 elements are enhanced with our Torah study. Number 1, it develops a relationship. Number 2, it preserves it. And lastly, it returns it, recovers it back to its former glory. Pretty remarkable. Number 19. How you guys doing here? We're getting close to the end. It feels great. Number 19. To live. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. But we have many, many statements in Jewish writings. Number 1, Kihem Chayenu, Borech Amenu. Torah is our life. Rabbi Akiva famously described Torah and the Jewish people that if you take a fish out of water, right, it's going to die. So you take a Jew out of Torah, he's going to die. Right, the Romans said, Hadrian said, the Jewish people, anyone who teaches Torah publicly gets executed. That's what he said. And Rabbi Akiva says, I'm teaching Torah anyhow. So the fellow came over to him and says to him, why are you teaching Torah? Everyone's going to die. He says, okay, well, we're going to die regardless. If we don't study Torah, we'll die. If we study Torah, maybe we'll be able to survive. But if we don't study Torah, we're for sure going to die like a fish out of water. Additionally, we find that the Torah is compared to water. This is in the Talmud as well. So if it's compared to a fish in water, it's for us, it's water. Gdola Torah shehi nosenes chayim. It's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Torah is great because it gives life. This obviously, I think, could be very much understood in light of what we said earlier, that there's this life that we need, just like our soul needs life. And how do we give it life? How do we give it air? How do we give it water? How do we give it food? Via Torah. Pretty incredible. Let's move on to number 20. My favorite, because it's so ambiguous. It's great. To earn allies in other places. And I'm just going to read what the Talmud says here. Rabbi Akiva says, he quotes a verse, Zemer b'chol yom, Zemer b'chol yom. And the verse says here, Nefesh amal amal alo, that a soul that toils, it toils for him. The Talmud says, what does that mean? If someone toils in Torah study here, his Torah toils for him somewhere else. There's a very famous Rashi here. Rashi says that the soul beseeches the Almighty. The Torah beseeches the Almighty on his behalf. Which, to me, it's incredible. Like, if you could choose any ally in the world, you probably would choose the United States first. Russia or China, India. I don't know who you would choose. But here the Talmud is saying we could choose the Torah itself. That could be the greatest ally ever. The greatest advocate for us ever. And it gives this vivid description. It says, you study for Torah, you toil in Torah here, and your Torah toils for you elsewhere. And it toils on your behalf in front of God. Whoa, mind blown, remarkable. Now, I'm leaving that ambiguous. I don't even know what that means. But I think I kind of want to have an advocate like the Torah. Wouldn't that be nice? Isn't that like the Torah itself, the Holy Torah? That's going to be our advocate? I'll take that. That's number 20, to earn allies in other places. To be protected and saved. This is once again I'm going to leave it very ambiguous because it's one of the most important Talmudic teachings with regards to the importance of Torah study. It's in the book of Sota on 21a. And it gives a description, Kiner mitzvah of Torah, or that a mitzvah is a candle and Torah is a light. And it gives a description of a man who was walking in the desert at night, and the animals were coming after him in the wild, and he would trip over the rocks, and he would be captured by heathens and conquistadors, and then he gets a candle, and he avoids this problem, and finally it's the day, and he avoids all problems. And it's saying the idea where they're comparing, and it says Torah madno masa, Torah protects and saves. Once again, I'm leaving it ambiguous because it's a very, very detailed description of everything that happens. There's the different dangers and how the Torah saves someone from those dangers. But either way, I'll take it. To be protected and saved. 22 to achieve lishma. Now, lishma, if you were to perhaps the epitome or the apex of Torah greatness or of Jewish greatness is the idea of lishma. Lishma means altruism. It means doing good for the sake of doing good. The problem with that is that it's not possible for us to do good for the sake of good, because even if we're driven by motivation. And the Talmud in several places says, yes, you can't do it. However, there's a way to do it. There's a trick. What's the trick? You have to do it for ulterior purposes, and that will bring it to altruistic purposes. Right? La'olam ya'asok adam b'torah u'b'mitzvot afilu shelo lishma. Someone should always study Torah and do mitzvahs, even for ulterior purposes. Why? Because via doing it shelo lishma, not for its intended purposes, right? For ulterior purposes, that will bring you to lishma. Thus, Torah is indeed the conduit to the highest form of greatness we could possibly have. And lastly, this cool little one for the end, number 23, to achieve dominion over nature. Someone mentioned already earlier that the Torah was the blueprint for the world. Thus, if you want to become a world maker, like we mentioned earlier, you want to have the Torah. So we find these great stories of these rabbis that kind of had nature in their hands. And the question is, you have rabbis reviving dead like no big deal. No big deal. There's so many episodes in the Talmud about that. There's one rabbi, he's walking along the way, and he sees a stream, and it's bothering him, and he says, let's split the sea. And he splits the sea. And it's kind of mind-blowing. How did they do that? It's a great story about Rabbi Yochanan. Right? Rabbi Yochanan, he's studying Torah, and every time he studies Torah, there's every bird that flies over him gets incinerated, gets burnt. So he would finish studying Torah and then would go out. Like when you park your car under a tree and you come back, there's little bird poop everywhere. And by him, when he would go study, there would be birds everywhere. It's kind of the opposite, just birds all over, just their corpses of birds everywhere. Because any bird that flew over the restricted airspace will get shot down by the Torah influence. You're like, whoa, there's like some sort of meta thing going on over here where there's this crossover that his Torah is influencing the physical world. And the reason is because if you have such mastery of Torah, then essentially you have mastery over the world. So everything is dependent upon you, so to speak. Thus, the idea of reviving dead, no big deal. Obviously, I don't know anyone who could do this nowadays. But I guess and that's why I don't know how practical it is. Kind of this wild card idea.
But if studying Torah is supposed to be so positive, why did it have such a negative effect?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because man does not live by bread alone, but by every word of God.
No, it's a good question. I like that.
He was studying the word of God and surviving because the pigeons and everybody was dying. So he goes out and he has fried chicken.
What?
Interesting.
He's got food to eat.
Fried chicken from pigeons.
Staying his life.
Fried chicken from pigeons.
Pigeons are
No, it's
Wait.
wrong.
So what's actually interesting is that there's a few episodes in the Talmud and Talmudic literature talking about fire and these rabbis and having fire around them. For example, Acher. Acher was this great rabbi who became a heretic. Acher he was the Rebbe, he was the teacher of Rabbi Meir, one of the great, great rabbis. And then he went off, so to speak. There's a whole story what happened to him, and he decided he's done with it, and he went. Acher means the other guy, or that's Acher, someone else. And he went on Shabbat, and he went to solicit a prostitute. That was the beginning of his undoing, or not beginning of his undoing, but that was like he's like, I'm out, and then whatever. And the girl says to him, The girl says to him, wait, aren't you the famous rabbi? So he goes, and it's Shabbos. He goes and he takes and he plucks a little flower out of the ground. And we know that on Shabbat, you know how to pluck flowers out of the ground. And she says to him, oh, you must be Acher. You must be someone else. So that name stuck. And anytime you read it in the Talmud, it says Acher. Well, who's Acher? Who's the other guy? It's talking about this guy. But either way, there's this narrative about his birth, and how by his bris, right, by the celebration of his circumcision, there were a bunch of rabbis there, and the rabbis were studying Torah, and there was fire surrounding the rabbis, and there was the Talmud says that they were studying Torah, and it was smeichim k'nisinasim b'Sinai, and they were happy like when it was given at Mount Sinai. And Acher's father was so taken by this, he says, I want my son to do this as well. So he put him in this highly intensive Torah, He like one of those Chinese kids that from the age of 4 they're going to be in the Olympics. That's what he did to him, Maybe that also contributed to he wasn't really healthy and balanced. That's why he was, he went awry. But either way, the idea, that's the other time I found fire. One more time, we might have mentioned this. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So he's in the cave. Remember him and the son? They're in the cave. Remember that guy? Remember that story? And what happens? They come out of the cave after 12 years, and what do? Right? They see a guy, and he's wasting his time. And then what they do? He looks at his field. Rabbi Shimon looks at his field, and his field burns down. And everywhere his eyes were going there was fire. And then he hears a prophetic voice, Shimon, you came out of the cave to destroy the world. Get back to the cave. Goes back to the cave, comes back 12 months later, and he sees a guy on Friday afternoon walking around with 2 flowers. He says to him, why do you need 2 flowers? 1 flower is enough. Which should be the rallying cry of men worldwide. Why do you need a dozen, dude? One's enough. So he says to him, why do you need 2 flowers? He says, well, this flower is for Shamar, and this flower is for Zachar. One to remember Shabbat, and one to guard the Shabbat. He says, and he made peace with humanity. But either way, we see that there is this idea of destructive fire via Torah. Now the question is, well, if they were able to have fire, well, then Moses, who's much greater in Torah, he would have fire as well. I think that there's. Yeah, nice, yeah.
In a mountain.
But I think that there is an even greater level where the fire is not harmful, where the influence of the Torah is not going to be enduring. I think there's this sweet spot where someone's Torah is so great, but not quite great enough that it's not detrimental for humanity. It's great enough to be impactful, but not great enough to not be injurious. Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point that it describes the greatest student. I don't remember who it was. It was Hillel, Yochanan Zakkai. I don't remember the exact. I think Hillel had 80 students. Pretty sure that's how it was. And the greatest one of them is Rabbi Yonasan ben Uziel. And the weakest one of them was Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. And Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, the birds would die. Well, if the birds would die while flying over him, what would happen when the birds would fly over the greatest of the 80 students? Well, they wouldn't die. Why? Because his Torah was even greater. So I think your point that you're bringing out a good point, that it doesn't seem to be a very valuable contribution to the world. But either way, it does demonstrate a certain degree of dominion over nature that we do find as a nice side benefit of the Torah. I want to say another quick point with this. I feel bad if I feel like the whole night I'm speaking really quickly. Am I? You're good, right? Huh? I am?
You say you're talking quickly.
Yeah.
You're flying.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I feel like it put me on fast forward, and sorry. I apologize. I'll say this slowly.
Let's start over.
So there's the commentary on the Torah, whose name is the Or HaChaim. He's a 17th or 18th century scholar who was buried in Israel, which is very uncommon at the time. And he asks a very important question. And he says, we look at the Talmud, we find many, many examples of great rabbis doing things that are supernatural. We find rabbis splitting the sea. So what's the big deal that Moses did it? Well, it makes it a big deal. We split the sea. Oh, fantastic. What's the big deal? Rabbis 1,500 years later did the same thing. That's his question. And he answers, he says, yes. The reason why the rabbis could do it is because they have Torah. When you have Torah, you have dominion over nature. Moses, he splits the sea before the Torah. The only reason why the miracle is so important, splitting the sea, that's because it came before the Torah. That means it's clearly something, just divine intervention. Right? Once we have the Torah, and if you have dominion of Torah, total mastery of the Torah, well then, of course, you have dominion over nature, and it's no big deal. Thus, all the miracles of the Torah are only really that transformational because they didn't have Torah to perform them, which is, to me, is a cool idea. Either way, I think that part 3 of our quest to find out why we study Torah, especially when, coupled with the other reasons, like this should be enough for us to really try to investigate and, do some time on our own and invest some portion of our life and our mind and our, in our time to this. There's so much to it. It's so crucial, so essential to us in our lives that I think that it certainly warrants a good, long, hard look, and not the kind that says, okay, I know everything that's been there. I went through 4 years of Hebrew school when I was 6, 7, and 8, and now I'm good to go. Unfortunately, a lot of people, when they have some sort of basic rudimentary exposure, they say, I don't want to go to a Torah class. I don't want to study Torah. I've been there. I did the circuit. I know what it's all about. Well, no, you don't know what it's all about. You've never studied any of it, and ironically, the more someone studies, the more they realize how little they know. Thus, if someone says, I know absolutely nothing about Torah, either they know absolutely nothing about Torah or they know a whole lot. They'll have the same reaction. So that's why it's important, but not to approach it with the perspective of this is something that I've seen before. Open mind and just try to let it affect who we are and make us hopefully really, really great people, great Jews, and great friends, great colleagues, and great Jews. And that's that, guys. And looking forward to seeing all of you next week. God willing. Thank you. I'm sorry for speaking really quickly.